In today's video, I'm going to give you 10 tips for coming up with character names for your comics, manga, and webtoon projects. Coming up with fitting names for your characters is one of the hardest tasks you will face as a writer. The weight of that responsibility often paralyzes amateur writers, resulting in them being unable to find the perfect name for their characters. On one hand, you don't want to give your character an ordinary pedestrian name that your reader will never remember. On the other hand, giving your character a name that is too creative or too flashy can distract or even confuse your reader. A quote-unquote wrong name can even take the reader out of your story or force them to backtrack and attempt to remember who is who. The quote-unquote right name can help you explore a character's best attributes and make it easier for your reader to identify with each character. But before we dive into creating character names, let's first hear a word from today's sponsor.
This video is proudly brought to you by Skillshare. Skillshare is an online learning community with thousands of online classes for anyone who loves learning and wants to explore their creativity. Skillshare is the perfect place to get inspired, learn new skills, and put them to work in impactful ways. Skillshare classes range from photography, illustration, graphic design, animation, freelancing, and more. For my audience, I highly recommend you check out Skillshare's classes focused on creating comics and manga. There are so many great resources for improving your manga artwork and storytelling abilities.
Right now I am taking the class Draw Manga with Clip Studio Paint, Settings, Inking, and Essential Techniques by Naomosa Matsuda. Matsuda is a professional Japanese manga artist based in Kyoto. He has published several manga titles and judged several manga competitions. He is currently a lecturer for manga universities in Japan and France. In this class, I learned how Japanese manga artists use Clip Studio Paint to create professional manga. More specifically, Matsuda's class taught me how to set up my manga page files, choose the best brushes for inking, and bind keyboard shortcuts. What I love about this class is that Matsuda's lessons are very easy to understand. He is able to convey years of professional experience in an accessible way for beginner artists. If you are an aspiring comic artist, manga artist, or webtoon artist, then I highly recommend you check out the Skillshare class.
Skillshare is ad-free, so you can stay in the zone while you are exploring new skills. New premium classes launch every week, so there's always something new to discover on Skillshare. If English is not your first language, Skillshare's entire catalog is now available with subtitles in Spanish, French, Portuguese, and German. The first 1,000 people to use the link in my video description and pinned comment will get a 1-month free trial of Skillshare. Take this opportunity to invest in yourself and your goals by becoming a Skillshare member today. Thank you again, Skillshare, for continuing to support the creative community. Now let's get back to the video.
Names can suggest the primary value, the core essence, or the narrative function of a character. For example, some character names may directly relate to their personality type, superpower, or appearance. Take for example Katsuki Bakugo from the Shonen Jump series My Hero Academia. The name Bakugo is a compound word that combines the kanji for bomb and go. The kanji in his name could be interpreted to mean bomber, which is a direct reference to his quirk Explosion. The kanji for his family name Katsuki can be read as victorious. One of Bakugo's most redeeming qualities is his desire to be the #1 hero, so you can see how the name Katsuki Bakugo is very fitting for him. Another example is the name Ichigo Kurosaki from the Shonen Jump manga Bleach. The name Ichigo can be written with the kanji that reads one guardian for boys and strawberries for girls. In Bleach, Ichigo becomes a substitute soul reaper to protect his family from being eaten alive by a demonic entity known as a hollow. He is also one of the only characters to have strawberry red hair. Ichigo's family name, Kurosaki, translates to Dark Destination, foreshadowing his connection to the darkness inside. When you name a character, you are giving them an identity. These names will help your character come alive for your readers. With that being said, here are 10 tips for coming up with character names for your story. Tip number 1, look for meaning. In every language, most names have associated meanings with them. Some cultures value name meanings more than others. For example, in Japan, names are usually written in kanji, symbols that represent words or ideas. Kanji characters can have different pronunciations depending on their context. Given names that end in hiko, suki, hei, o, or shi are usually male names. Given names that end in i, yo, mi, na, ko, or ka are usually female names. Many Japanese surnames are derived from landscape features, such as Yamamoto, which means base of the mountain, or Kishi, which means shore. In other languages, such as English, name meanings are not valued as much. English names do have associated meanings, but many people would not know them unless they research them. In English, names with hard consonants such as T or K are more often associated with strong personalities. Names with softer consonants like A or I are more commonly used for approachable characters. When writing a story, it is important to remember that you have the ability to give your character's name meaning. You don't need to give your character a common name like John Smith just because it is realistic. In the dystopian novel The Hunger Games, Katniss Everdeen is named after the aquatic plant Sagittaria. Sagittaria is commonly nicknamed Arrowhead and Katniss. The character Katniss Everdeen is known for being a talented archer, so you can see how this name is fitting. If you are struggling to choose a name for an original character, consider looking at names with associated meanings that are directly related to your character's personality, appearance, or actions. Tip number 2, flashy names. It isn't a bad thing to want your character to stand out and be memorable. A flashy name may be the perfect way to separate your character from the crowd. Looking at a fantasy novel like A Song of Fire and Ice, there are characters with fierce names like Jon Snow, Daenerys Targaryen, and Eddard Stark. Impactful names are not only unique to the fantasy genre. Take a look at a sci-fi story like Star Wars, for example. There are powerful names like Luke Skywalker, Obi-Wan Kenobi, and Han Solo. Each of these character names have associated meanings that link them to their personality traits, the fictional world they live in, or concepts established in the story's world building. Remember, your goal is to come up with a character name that is flashy enough to set them apart from your side characters and background characters. You must do this while at the same time not using a name that is too distracting or difficult for your reader to comprehend. Tip number 3, first name, last name relationship. You want your character's first name and last name to flow well together. Usually, writers tend to give their characters shorter first names and longer surnames. For example, think of characters like Levi Ackerman, Aki Hayakawa, and Gen Asagiri. The opposite is also true. Some writers like to give characters longer first names and shorter last names. Think of characters like Atsushi Murasakibara, Louise Francois LeBlanc de la Valliere, and Ryunosuke Tanaka. A common or pedestrian first name can be more effective when paired with an unusual last name. The fantasy series Harry Potter does this well, with characters like Harry Potter, Sirius Black, and Luna Lovegood. Like before, the opposite is also true. Think of characters like Light Yagami, Rock Lee, and Eren Yeager. By creating a balanced name, it will be easier for your reader to remember and identify them. Tip number 4, character name variation. Your characters should have names that vary in length and meaning. They should also begin with different letters and sound unique from one another. For example, it might be confusing if your story has a character named Tim and a character named Tom. You want to consciously choose names that look different from each other on the page. Don't give your reader an opportunity to be confused. Tip number 5, avoid names that end in S. It is important to think about your story long term. More than likely, there are going to be situations where you need to use your character's name in the possessive tense. What I mean by this is to consider what your character's name will sound like and look like if you add an apostrophe S to the end of it. When you add an apostrophe S to the end of a name that also ends in S, it can be very difficult to pronounce and read. Tip number 6, pay homage to a famous name. If there is a real-life person or fictional character that you love, it is possible to incorporate parts of their name into your own work. Of course, you need to be aware of copyright laws surrounding trademark names. Alluding to an iconic character or celebrity is a great way to show your admiration for the original work. Look at a successful series like Bungo Stray Dogs. Each character is named after a famous author. In the series Aria of Scarlet Ammo, there are even characters named after Sherlock Holmes and Arsene Lupin. Tip number 7, don't fake foreign or antique names. Naming fictional characters in historical fiction requires extensive research. Similarly, you will need to do your homework for other cultures if you want to give your character a foreign name. Different cultures have different languages and naming conventions. It is important to understand this before assigning a random name to your character just because you think it's cool. I say this because some traditional publishers look down on this process. I have personally heard publishers say that they turn down submissions that feature characters with Japanese names when the author is not Japanese and has no relation to Japan. Tip number 8, don't name every character. A common pitfall many writers find themselves in is writing too many characters. What this critique means is that the reader has trouble keeping track of the cast in the story. Having too many names in a story can clutter the experience and overwhelm your reader. You do not need to name every background character, only focus on your main characters and side characters who play a significant role in the story. For example, if your characters need to take a taxi to their next destination, there is no reason to name the taxi driver unless they are important to the story later on. This is especially important when you are writing in the mystery genre. Tip number 9, making names up. Sometimes, names based on the real world or pre-existing works do not fit what you were going for with your story. Maybe your series is set in the distant future where naming conventions have changed completely. In this scenario, it is acceptable to come up with a 100% unique character name using everything that you know about naming characters. Maybe there is a sound, prefix, or suffix that you like that you can use as your base. There are no rules with this method, it is completely okay to get creative. Tip number 10, use additional resources. If you are still unable to come up with the perfect name for your character, it might be helpful to get inspiration from other sources. Phone books are a great resource for exposing yourself to a variety of different names. If you find the name that you like, you can easily tweak it so it better fits your story or character's personality using the methods that we mentioned before. Baby name books or websites are also great tools for finding inspiration. Remember, there is no fixed formula for giving your character a quote-unquote good name. Your goal should be to create a name that is both memorable and interesting. In other words, it should be fitting. The names for your characters should make sense in the context of your story. They should also align with the genre that your story is told in. Be unique. You don't need to give your character a regular or pedestrian name. The names for your original characters should be appropriate for their role in the story. They should also be memorable without being too distracting. Well, that's going to do it for today's video. I hope you were able to get some value out of it. If you enjoyed, please leave this video a thumbs up and subscribe to my YouTube channel if you haven't already. Over 60% of my regular viewers are not subscribed. Leave a comment down below telling us about some of your favorite character names from any comic, manga, webtoon, TV show, book, or movie. Remember, you can further support me by following me on all of my social media accounts. I post all of my finished artwork over on Instagram and Twitter. As always, keep creating everyone. I will see you all in the next one.